This segment of the Alice Stewart Show is brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing at 1-866-PLUMBER or schedule an appointment online at aeroplumbing.net.
And we're back on the Alice Stewart Show, 7:35. It's a beautiful Wednesday out there as you head out to work or get the little ones ready for school. We're talking health care and health insurance with an expert in the field. Julie Benafield is the owner of the Benafield Group. She is the former Arkansas Insurance Commissioner under Governor Mike Huckabee. And Julie, you're familiar with all this healthcare stuff.
More than I want to be, I think, now.
You're the expert. Some of it is it's all Greek to a lot of folks, including myself. But there have been some new numbers come out in light of the recent high court rulings on the Affordable Care Act. And we talked about this at the time. Now there's some new numbers out. And recently, there's what I call the dueling rulings, a tale of two rulings that were the best of times, yet the worst of times for Obamacare. First came out, this was a few weeks ago, a 3-judge panel in D.C. Court of Appeals ruled against a big part of Obamacare that federal subsidies for millions of people who signed up for the healthcare law were in question. And it created a path for a challenge to federal subsidies. And then a short time later, a Fourth Circuit panel in Virginia decided just the opposite, declaring the subsidies legal and proper. So we have one court saying the federal subsidies are not proper and another court saying that they are legal and proper. So it caused some concern, but now we're waiting to hear how that plays out and the final ruling on that. But here's some numbers, potential fallout of this. 4.7 million. That's the number of people receiving subsidies in the federal marketplace this year, according to federal data. So 4.7 million people, their health care is in jeopardy. Your thoughts on that?
I don't know that I would necessarily say that their health care is in jeopardy. That's the number of people receiving the subsidies in the federal marketplace. We don't know exactly where they came from. That number doesn't say, all right, these people have had health care elsewhere. They have had it through their employer. They have had it on individual policies. They have had it through some sort of Medicaid. They have been uninsured. We don't know exactly what that number means, the 4.7 million. It just means that that's the number of people receiving subsidies in the federal marketplace.
And we have 14 million. That's the rough estimate of how many people would receive federal subsidies by 2017 if the current enrollment patterns continue. And that's the first year numbers understate the impact because the total exchange could verify, or could change a little bit. Your thoughts on this number?
Well, that, again, that's a rough estimate, and if we are to believe what the federal government says or estimates, sure, we can name any number we want to say that that's the number. I understand this is a Business Week article, and this is some federal data that has come out, and the Congressional Budget Office is estimating all these numbers. I somehow wonder if this is not some sort of propaganda to scare people,
right?
And say, "Oh, you're going to lose your accessibility to health care." Well, that's not necessarily true.
Here's something that is, I see a concern. 86%. 86%. That's the proportion of subsidy recipients of all of those who bought insurance on the federal exchange. And the vast majority of people who use the Federal Insurance Exchange website to buy coverage receive some sort of subsidy. So with these different court rulings, all of these people, 86% of those people, they have cause for concern.
They do have cause for concern, but I think that it's only cause for concern because they may have to look at a different way of getting their health care. There are all kinds of ways to get their health care. Now, the 86% is probably pretty accurate. 86% of the people who went through the exchanges to get a subsidy, I was counseling people to only go on the exchange if they were going to be eligible for subsidy, because basically there's no reason to go on the exchange if you are not going to be eligible for a subsidy. You can only get a subsidy if you are on the exchange. But other than that, you can go get your policies in the private market, and which is exactly what I did. When I got my own business, I went to the private market and got my policy. So anyone can do that because the rules are the same as far as pre-existing conditions and those kinds of things. And so the only reason to go into exchange would be to get a subsidy. So I think 86% who got a subsidy on the exchange is pretty accurate.
And your thoughts on this? We don't hear a lot about the Affordable Care Act these days in the news, simply because there's so much other headline grabbing events going on. Certainly with foreign policy and on the border. But your thoughts? I mean, the last discussions or conversations on Obamacare's these dueling rulings. We have still a lot of uncertainty about the different rates from the insurance companies. Will people be dropped before or after elections? And as Andrew DeMillo indicated, how big of a factor do you see Obamacare and these numbers playing in these midterm elections, whether we're talking Mark Pryor or Mike Ross, but specifically Mark Pryor and Tom Cotton? How big of a factor will that be in people as they go to vote this year?
I think in Arkansas, it's a big issue. I think in states like Arkansas, it's a big issue because it personally affects a lot of people in Arkansas. You see that the Obamacare helped some people. Certainly it did. It had some good things,
right?
Good things about it, good issues about it. But I believe that you will see a negative impact on a larger percentage than a positive impact on the percentages of people. And I think that is a problem. And it is interesting how the people running for office term, Affordable Care Act, Obamacare, whether they mention it at all, how they decide, well, we're going to throw it out totally and start all over, or we're going to keep parts of it, which parts they would parse out and keep. I think it's very smart on Hutchinson's part to not come out and say, I promise we're going to keep the private option. To say it's only been in place for 8 months. Let's step back a minute and look at the numbers and see what happens. It takes a little bit longer than 8 months to determine if something is successful.
I want to ask you this. You're former Arkansas Insurance Commissioner, Julie Benafield with the Benafield Group here, and with the Affordable Care Act, and so many things the actual law itself is really a shell of itself. We've had the president delaying the employer mandate. He has delayed the individual mandate. We have the HHS mandate on abortion-inducing drugs has been called into question by the Supreme Court, and still a lot of uncertainty about rates and costs. Your prediction as an insurance expert as to what the future of Obamacare is after there's a possibility that Republicans will gain control in the Senate. That will change the dynamics in D.C. But your prediction as to what Obamacare, the Affordable Care Act, will look like this time next year.
Yeah, I was about to say, give me 5 years to change it. It'll take a little bit longer than a year.
Yeah.
I do think it will look different than it does now. I think some of the things have been, like I said, I'm going to be a little bit good about it. I'm going to say that, the pre-existing condition issue, that keeping the children on until they're 26, because that does cover an area in there, especially when children are out of college before they can get on their own and get a good job. I think those things are good. There are a few things in there that are good. The other things, some other issues where there are a lot of mandates on the insurance companies, for instance, are too far-reaching, and they're just not workable. And as we saw already, some of the deadlines didn't work. They had to be extended already, and those things that you mentioned just did not work. And so those will have to be redone and looked at again. And there are several other things in there. I just think that it will look different. I think in 5 years, 1 to 5 years, I'll give you that. I will start with next year and then go to 5 years. I think it will look different. I don't know what name we will give it, but I think it will look different than it does now. It will have to.
Right. It just doesn't seem to be, with all of the changes at the hands of the president himself, acknowledging that we need to delay some of these things or rework some of these. It will be dramatically different. But I think the idea is sound and right and valid. It's just a matter of how we go from point A to point B.
Yeah, I do find it interesting that he says it's been successful, but yet he's changed it, 44 times already?
Exactly.
I'm going to try that.
Yeah,
it's been my arguments.
Yes, it's been an amazing success story. What part of that?
Yeah.
Anyway, we'll continue this conversation with Julie Benafield, the owner of the Benafield Group, former Arkansas Insurance Commissioner. After this, here on the Alice Stewart Show, this segment of the program brought to you by Aero Plumbing. For all of your household or business plumbing needs, call Aero Plumbing 1-866-PLUMBER or schedule an appointment online at aeroplumbing.net.